Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Monday, March, is it the 12th already?
It's the 12th, Jake.
It is the 12th, my goodness. And Monday. Got a lot to talk about today. I think there is also a point that I wanted to clear up for an individual on space weather, but we'll go ahead and do a space weather report real fast. And checking out spaceweather.com, our solar wind speeds are right at a calm 383.2 kilometers per second with a density of 5.5. Here we are at day number 9, 0 sunspots. That gives us 37 days on the year for 2018. Now, the coronal hole that we have, right now our KP indices are at a 1, so we're not yet in the effects of this coronal hole as it's now become Earth facing. I want to stress that the wider the hole, the faster the solar wind speed is. So right now we're looking at this pretty large coronal hole as far as width goes, and if that holds up, we could see a jump in the KP indices. Now, I had an individual contact me, David. Thank you very much for the heads up. I looked into the report that you gave me, and it doesn't say anything about KP indices above a 5, which is generally just a G1 on the storm basis. So I still appreciate the heads up, because we should be watching this coronal hole situation, just because I think it has, in my opinion, in watching these over the last year and a half or so, this has potential to be a little bit more than a G1. So I think David's intention is, I think these are being downplayed a little bit, and it's possible, but we'll just have to keep reporting on it and watch it. But yeah, we're supposed to see the effects from this coronal hole by March 14th, and some are suggesting that we're going to have 2 of these 3-day events just because of how wide this coronal hole is. So I can imagine how long it's going to take for it's Earth facing now, and it still has quite a bit of the hole that's still turned towards Earth. So interesting next few days. We'll definitely be watching our space weather. And something I did forget to go to is and Mari has changed things around a little bit here.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Here we are. I found it. I wanted to look at our TSI before we move along from our space weather report here and go on to other things. Our looking at TSI.
I'm going to zoom this in
Please
for you,
do,
Jake.
because this will take like 30 minutes if we wait for me to do it. I was trying to get Starman was asking me questions about TSI, and I was trying to get numbers for him. And by the way, Starman, if you're watching, this was where I was pulling the numbers from. So I used to pull the numbers from the same site. The short source he was showing me is what I used to use, but the only reason why I'm following this is that it seems to be close to what the old report. It's off by a few points, but the graph and the chart, it's close enough to show exactly what's going on, and it's only if anything there's a difference, but not a big of a difference to like really matter and confuse. So, but anyhow, the last report on this was March 4th, 1361.097. So again, the TSI ratings, if we go to the other side of this where it shows you the raw data and the numbers, and I'm not sure what the difference is between the two, because this is from the exact same site that we used to pull the TSI data from. And I like down here, the one thing I like about this site better than the other is that this one gives you an idea of what is happening here. And I'm going to scroll down here and show you guys the bottom line here, this graph down at the bottom where it says 2014, 15, 16, 17. This gives you a clear idea of how much our TSI has dropped since 2015. So that's the most important thing, is that these numbers are so minute, and every time we do a report, they move so slightly. You never see more than a couple of points drop in it, and And, also the reason why Starman and I were talking about TSI is that he was curious to see what the TSI readings were when we had the 2 X-class flares back in September. And they came out to be right around almost the same exact number. And also notice that just days before the solar class, the X-class solar flares, we had a TSI drop by 3 points. It was in the 1359.84 range. And so it also begs to differ, is a sudden drop like that, because it immediately shot back up into the 1360s. It didn't last but the 5th and the 6th, and then it went right back up to 1360, 61. But the question has to be asked, are these sudden TSI drops, are these indicators that we have possible M to X class flares coming from the sun? Is that an indicator that when the sun drops that much in TSI that we're about to see a big solar flare? So something to keep an eye on, something I'm going to start a new research project on, because that's interesting to me to look back at the data and see if there is a correlation with X-class flares and sudden TSI drop. You got to remember too, back in September, early September, we had hurricane, was it Harvey was the first one. So we were dealing with a major hurricane during the time that we had a sudden drop in TSI and X-class solar flares. So September was a remarkable month as far as space weather and our climate goes. There was so much that you can correlate what happened in 17. And if you look at the dips here on this bottom graph, if you look right next to 2017, you see that one big dip to the right of it. I think these are the indicators where you saw the sudden drops in TSI. They kind of fit in line to where the 1359s are. So again, I'll have to go back and research, how deep, how many points does it take to maybe trigger a X-class solar flare event. So something to keep an eye on. And I know Starman is very versed in this category as well with TSI and solar flares. So if you guys follow him on Twitter, good for you. If you haven't yet, go follow him on Twitter. This guy constantly is tweeting out information. And honestly, he helps with his information that he tweets. It helps me keep up to date with certain things. He also brought to my awareness that we are going to be looking at another possible temperature situation up in the North Pole by March 25th. Another anomaly that we might have to tend with. So when you hear that, and last time we had that issue with in the Arctic when we had the polar region split because of the warm air intrusion, we saw that Europe got the Siberian Express because of that split. Now, we've always talked about on the Grand Solar Minimum channel that these things are, they flow like a yin and a yang. So I have to bring up the question, if we see another event like that, where we're talking about another split in the vortex, are we going to be basically, is it going to be our turn to get that colder air this time around than last time? So it'll be interesting to see in the coming days, weeks I should say, how this pans out. And these are just early indications. There's nothing in stone right now, but it sure doesn't look good from what I've seen in the model. And kind of looking at right here, right now, folks, if you look directly over the pole, you see a weaker area of cold. And then you see, of course, the other side of it, Russia, Asian area, the deep cold. And then, of course, here towards North America, there's this region of colder air. So it almost looks like there's already the beginning of a possibility of another polar region effect, where we see another split polar vortex in late March. And a lot of forecasters, especially the ones here in the Grand Solar Minimum community, have forecasted that we were going to get cooler weather all the way through April and possibly especially for folks here in the Northeast. We're talking about possibility of not seeing at least milder weather until mid-May. That wouldn't surprise me. Living here in Buffalo, New York, we saw some very cool summer days last year. Summer nights were very cool. So each year it seems like we get a little bit cooler. I remember 2 years ago when I was living in Southwest Ohio and I was at a 4th of July event. And the temperatures, I remember wearing a hoodie and shorts and wishing that I'd wore sweatpants instead. And I thought to myself, and this is before I really got into the whole weather situation that's going on, but I thought to myself, like, man, when was the last time I had to think about wearing sweatpants during a 4th of July fireworks display? I mean, it felt like fall outside. So I think even the average person is paying attention and can see these things a mile away as well. And once again, Friday, our last broadcast on Friday, I briefly talked about how this storm looked like it was going to be hugging the coast a little bit more, and that I thought it was going to turn into our possible third nor'easter. Because at that time, right before I went on, they had a forecast where this thing was heading out to the Atlantic, no problems, maybe some snow on the East Coast, but it wasn't going to go up the Northeast. Well, that's changed. The situation now is going to be heavy snow from Boston to New England, minor coastal flooding, and the potential for strong winds. Some areas are expecting in the south, here's what's going on. With this nor'easter, a third one, I don't care how weak this system is, the fact that this area within 10 days has seen three major low pressure systems. One, Riley, that just knocked their socks off. Quinn came in and kind of pushed down the people that were already down. This one right here just adds injury to insult as far as the cleanup efforts. So this is the fourth major nor'easter of the season since January. So I'm pretty sure that is a record right now. Before we had nor'easters, before I even heard of nor'easters, we would get one or two, and those were freak storms. And these last three in the last 10 days have developed as if this is just some kind of normal pattern. So interesting to see, and there's a lot of moisture too in the south. The Gulf has been very busy at producing the fuel for a lot of these storms. The warm area here, and there was also some kind of a temperature anomaly that I saw down in the Gulf of Mexico. A few people had brought that to my attention. I'm still looking at that, but it would explain why there's so much moisture coming from the Gulf and fueling our storms. But this is precipitation forecast. Now it's all minor, under an inch, but my goodness, I'm going to pause this when we get to the end. This is GFS total accumulated precipitation inches, and this is the forecast, the outlook here. We are right now, it's the mid part of or early next week. Here's Monday, we're at Tuesday, but I'm going to pause it here. So what they're saying is here for the next 10 days, 13, 15, so the next 2 weeks, we're looking at precipitation accumulation. This has got to be wrong. I don't, 7 inches forecasted, 5, 6, 7 inches of rain in the Mississippi Valley and the Ohio Valley here below the Ohio River. That's a lot of precipitation in, I guess it's 2 weeks, so it's span out. But still, this area is already saturated right now. And the flooding will continue in the east. And there is a lot of farmland, I can tell you that, here in Kentucky and Tennessee and Iowa and Missouri, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, tons of farmland, Pennsylvania as well, Northwest, just from my experience of driving through these states on a regular basis. lots of farmland, and they probably would like to start getting things planted out here, but there's no way they could do that if their fields are underwater. And I'm just really concerned. And you go back here to California, and I've been saying this now for a few days. The totals they're looking at here for their precipitation in a 10-day period, this indicates that we're looking at somewhere in the tune of 10 to 16 inches of rain in the next 15 days. Now, I'm sure the higher elevations will see that in snow, which will be huge amounts of snow building up into the mountains. But very active March, spring so far. The temperatures here in the Northeast, in my opinion, aren't really, spring-like to me. We're in the low 30s. Most of the Northeast is. I was watching some weather last night, and it was interesting to see some of these weathermen talking about how some of these temperatures in certain areas of the United States are below average right now in March. And a lot of the areas, the Midwest, the South. So looking at this storm, it's not going to really impact anyone until they get around the Jersey area, New York City, Boston, New England. This is where the storm really ramps up and turns into a major snow event. Like I said before, it would, this thing was already out to sea by now on previous models. But this does generate winds from the north, which you'll see lake effect in western New York and northeast Ohio. And these lake effect snow showers seem to stick around all the way till Thursday. So they start up on Monday and western New York and the northeast. I mean, it looks like it's off and on through Friday too. So winter storm number 3 here in the nor'easter number 3, its effects will linger on for several days, especially in the northern parts of New England and Maine. There's Thursday. We're still seeing snow at the far tip of the Northeast. So this snow system starts up basically Monday. It gets heavy into Tuesday and just strengthens from there and kind of hangs around and lingers in its effect. Like I said, it's bringing in the northerly winds, which the Great Lakes here are not frozen anymore. So this will give opportunity to see some lake effect snow. But the good news that I've seen is that the temperatures have been right around freezing here in the Northeast, or a little bit above. So we're seeing the snow, but it's mainly sticking to the snow that's already in the grassy areas. The pavement's been in pretty good shape. So we haven't seen a snow that's covered the pavement probably since the, Riley's snowstorm? Yeah, Riley was the last snowstorm that brought snow that covered the pavement. Excuse me, folks. I'm trying to get my coffee here. All right, so good news, bad news. Good news is that we see a brief period of drying out for the midsection of the United States. The Southeast, the South needs it. The Midwest, and then boom, Friday. Now the storm system, not as powerful as once projected, because I have been showing you guys a model for the 20th, but interesting to see the new update here on the 18th. We've got 2 big systems not too far apart from each other, so by the 19th of March we're seeing tons of rain. Look at how massive this system becomes by the 19th. This is a slow developing storm, folks. This takes almost 3 days to get its act together, and finally by March 20th, again, the models are still consistent that this thing is going to develop into a major storm. Look at all that rain that we're getting again, Ohio River. So we'll definitely be on a flood watch for that. So that storm is only 8 days away. And as we move into Wednesday of next week, it's once again, northeast of the United States is getting pounded with snow and ice. And as this one's moving out on the coast, right behind it is another low pressure system that is developing in California and moving west and taking snow with it. So once we get this one major storm out of here by the end of March, the 24th, the 25th, another giant low pressure system moves through the states. And it almost looks like after the 25th that our jet stream is trying to empty the chamber. But then once again, the 26th, unreal. The size of these systems that are just developing one after another. So very active March, very stormy to come. Again, the concern has to be about crops, how we're looking at a very late plant season if this kind of weather continues. Now, here's what I wanted to look at, because I wanted to see how our warm weather and cold air was battling here. How far is this Arctic push as we move it a little faster so we can kind of see the rotation of this cold Arctic air that's trying to make its way into the lower 48s. So I'll pause it on the 25th as well. Just give me a second here. Here we go. So here's the 26th. Looks like the majority of the country is trying to get into spring, the low 40s, mid 40s, and the further south you go, you see some 50s and 60s. Still, for late March, in my opinion, especially in the south, I've lived in southern Tennessee, and I've seen it where it was 80 degrees in March. But that's not normal. I mean, the normal is probably around 65 in March and this time of year, especially heading into April. We are still on the cool side for most of the country. So it'll be interesting to see if and when this polar vortex could possibly split again with this intrusion of very warm air that's coming into the North Arctic area. Once again, it's being predicted now. It's not set in stone, but it's being predicted towards the end of March. And again, I want to thank Starman out there for putting that to my attention. Mari, did you have anything, or was there anything in the chat anybody wanted to address?
No, just talking about, mostly planting, gardening, what's affected, the crops, the almond crops in California right now. People are talking about that. And I was just talking about some of the items we have in our back garden and how they've been suffering and what we plan to do. I was hoping we could try some raised beds because our soil is very clay-like.
Yeah, we're going to have to. It's
holding a lot of moisture. So we're thinking raised beds and, seeing how that goes. So just chatting about gardening. Pete recommended a channel. I got to scroll up to see what it was. There's a cool gardening channel called, I guess Larry Hall has a YouTube channel that's all gardening related. I'm going to check him out and see. I haven't had time to do a lot of gardening research or anything like that because I've been following the weather and the volcano and PNG and sorting some website issues out. So I've been playing that backlog of catch up with the interviews. I finally got Ralph and Sasha's interview out, so I'm just playing catch up right now. But
we intend, Mari and I have talked about, we have a third story of our house, and it would be a perfect area, because it's semi-finished already, so it'd be a perfect area to start our indoor growing preparations. This is where, it's an area where there is efficient sunlight in one part of the house. We'd have to be very strategic on where we position our grow tables, but this is something that we realize that we need to get that started as soon as possible, as well as Mari's good idea of having raised boxes in the backyard to grow out of, because she's right. The snow is melting up here. We're in the mid 30s most of the time, so it's a very, very slow melt, and it's keeping things very, very clay-like. Everything is mud, but it's also a very almost thick pasty as well. So saturated soil, it's going to be tough to be plowing and digging. So that's why I think Mari and I are probably going to plan to do the indoor stuff as well this year. So hopefully we could get that set up as soon as possible. And what we'll do is we'll start monitoring. We'll do updates. We'll show the process and the progress. So hopefully we're able to we want to get that project started within the next month or so, because it's not just something to talk about for our YouTube channel. It's something that we have seen with our own eyes right now, watching the weather, monitoring the space weather, the science, that the papers that come out with it, lining everything up. And, not to scare anybody, but Mari and I really have come to grips with that this situation is coming. And I don't think people are really doing enough to take it seriously. And I think it's channels like us, for as long as we have the luxury of the internet and the power, we need to be as informative as much as possible. And that also means, sharing information should be something that's encouraged, and it's unfortunate to see that certain people out there are doing this just for certain notorieties and not to help spread the wealth and the education of the grand solar minimum. So sad revelation, but it's not surprising. It happens in all sectors of life.
Our website got taken over by a couple days. Are we mentioning that?
Well, I wasn't going to, but that's what kind of triggered this, was that we had shared a link on our website, and we recommend the website that we shared the link and actually included them in our resource links for people to go and view their information, because it's a superb site. Superb, absolutely. But we had a problem with our website, and because of that, the code from the link and that website is purposely done that way. So if you ever try to share their information, just sharing it, it automatically takes over your domain and gives people the option to sign into their website first before visiting your website. So we took the article link down, we took the link of the website out, and we're not going to name the website because we're not interested in starting wars. But I just wanted to mention that there are people out there. Their intentions are not to educate you. They want to be first. They want to be profitable. They want to be the lone source of the grand solar minimum. And I say the more the merrier. The more people that share the information about the grand solar minimum, as long as it's fair and for real,
not
sensationalized, but as long as it's correct information, the more the better. And there's just people out there, if you don't line up with their theories and their agenda, they don't want you spreading the information, because I don't know if they felt maybe that that Mari and I, we don't sensationalize the situation, and maybe that hurts their business. I don't know, but it's a shame that we all just can't come together and work this stuff out together and learn together and help each other, instead of trying to make this privileged information. So I'm done with my rant.
I don't have much. I'm going to be putting, I just got to sort through data today and organize things. So
sounds like a good idea.
We'll have plenty of content coming ahead, and we'll keep on doing these live streams.
Yep. All right, guys, if there's anything that needs to come back, we will come back to. We'll probably monitor the storm that we have coming out today. Like I said, in the Northeast, we'll really start to see its effects probably later on this afternoon. It'll start to ramp up. So if there's anything breaking, we will be back. We'll talk soon. Kilometers per second with a density of 5.5. Here we are at day number 9, 0 sunspots. That gives us 37 days on the year for 2018. Now, the coronal hole that we have right now, our KP indices are at a 1, so we're not yet in the effects of this coronal hole as it's now become Earth facing. I want to stress that the wider the hole, the faster the solar wind speed is. So right now we're looking at this pretty large coronal hole as far as width goes, and if that holds up, we could see a jump in the KP indices. Now, I had an individual contact me, David. Thank you very much for the heads up. I looked into the report that you gave me, and it doesn't say anything about KP indices above a 5, which is generally just a G1 on the storm basis. So I still appreciate the heads up, because we should be watching this coronal hole situation, just because I think it has, in my opinion, in watching these over the last year and a half or so, this has potential to be a little bit more than a G1. So I think David's intention is, I think these are being downplayed a little bit, and it's possible, but we'll just have to Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Monday, March, is it the 12th already?
It's the 12th, Jake.
It is the 12th, my goodness. Monday. Got a lot to talk about today. I think there is also a point that I wanted to clear up for an individual on space weather, but we'll go ahead and do a space weather report real fast. And checking out spaceweather.com, our solar wind speeds are right at a calm 383 point. Keep reporting on it and watch it, but yeah, we're supposed to see the effects from this coronal hole by March 14th, and some are suggesting that we're going to have 2 of these 3-day events just because of how wide this coronal hole is. So I can imagine how long it's going to take for it's earth facing now, and it still has, you know, quite a bit of the hole that's still turned towards earth. So interesting next few days. We'll definitely be watching our space weather. And something I did forget to go to is our Amari has changed